Hollywood has many trends, and just patterns that they do. But the one that bothers me the most, and that has always bothered me a lot, has got to be the successful movie spawns a lot of copycats. Sometimes it's not just one, it's either 2 or 3 films that worked out so well because they worked with one specific formula that spawned a million copycats that just didn't work. For example, The Dark Knight was the first dark superhero movie to really work, which, spawned all these copycat, dark superhero stylized films that just didn't work as well as The Dark Knight. But what I'm trying to get to is, let's go back some years. Let's go back to 2014 and 2015, when 2 movies impacted the action genre like never before. John Wick and Mad Max Fury Road were 2 movies that became really, really successful. One more than the other, but let's look at them for a second. Both John Wick and Mad Max are films that are called to be one of the greatest action films of our time, if not of all time. If we look at them, they have incredible action scenes, incredible action set pieces, great performances, complex characters that have an agenda that they have to fulfill, and like I said, they have a great action sequences. But let's look at the specific thing that made these movies so popular. It was the huge action and yet the simple story. Both John Wick and Mad Max favor from having such huge action pieces and a really simple story. But the thing about Mad Max and John Wick that worked, it's not that the story was simple, but it was that the characters were really complex, and like I said, they had an agenda to follow, and you believed them. You believed them and you were on board with them, and you wanted to follow them in this crazy adventure. This brings us to today. It's been 4 and 3 years since both of these films have been released, and in that time we've had a lot of action movies that lack great story. And this leads me to Upgraded. Let me make this clear. I think that action films, if they do what they're meant to do, which is, display great action, they already are somewhat enjoyable. But I don't think that just by having great action, you have a great movie in your hands. If we look at other type of franchises, we can see why they are successful. You've got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which are movies that excel in action, and their stories sometimes are not that great and sometimes are not that deep, but their characters are really likable. They specifically work a lot to flesh out our main characters, to make them likable and for us to fall in love with them and eventually follow them throughout all these movies. And when it comes down to it, we feel for them, which at the end of the day makes us think that, well, at least it was at least an enjoyable story, and that works. The Mission Impossible franchise is another one that I really like, not only because it has amazing practical action set pieces that put me at the edge of my seat, but also because they put a lot of thought into their story. While these stories may be sometimes ridiculous and over the top, at least there's some thought behind it, and the characters are also likable enough to get behind them and follow them in this mission, and at the end of the day, just have a blast with Tom Cruise and his crew. Now, looking at Upgraded. Upgraded is a movie that, in my opinion, failed. Like, there was nothing about this movie that really stood out to me besides some action moments. And when you look at Upgraded, you can see that the director, who also wrote the script, fell in love with this concept, which by the way is Venom. But not only did he fall in love with this concept, he fell in love with the idea of making the action the way that he did. And the action in this movie works. Does it get old after some time? Yes, because it's like a magician showing you a magic trick over and over again, and at some point the wow factor just is not there anymore. But still, there are action sequences that are fun enough. Now, I won't spoil anything in case you haven't seen the movie or the trailer and you want to go into this as blind. The main reason I didn't like this movie is because the story, or lack thereof, was just a mess. And when I look at movies like John Wick and Mad Max, even though they had simple stories, at least the stories it seems like the writer tried, and even though he knew that they were specifying on the action sequences, at least he was making the story somewhat likable, so the action would have effect on it, you know? To me, Upgraded, it had no effect on me. We're supposed to care for the wife of this character, and I just didn't. I couldn't care for her, I didn't care for her, they didn't flesh her out whatsoever. She was one-dimensional, and she literally, I think that her character bio was just, you're a wife and you're gonna do wifey things, and that's it. And when she becomes a key element of the plot, it just didn't work for me because I didn't care for her. Viscount Tom Hardy just didn't deliver the performance that I was looking for in a character like this, so I couldn't really get behind him either. And his character wasn't fleshed out that much either. It was like, you know, you start the movie and you see a few things of him before the plot kicks in, but before the plot kicks in, you didn't show me enough for me to fully understand this character, not only fully understand him, to fully get behind him and follow him on the mission. And I just couldn't get behind this story or the characters either. I didn't care about them. And also, it seemed like every character in this movie was really freaking stupid. There were so many things that were so obvious, and when the reveal came to be, it was like, seriously? Seriously, you didn't see that coming a mile away? Like, there's a cop character in this movie, and I have not seen such a stupid cop character in a movie in such a long time. She's literally written to be the audience member, you know. She is explaining things, and she looks at cameras, she looks at footage, and she's like, what does this all mean? Maybe I'll ask him and he'll probably know, but she is supposed to be a cop, and she's got all the technology in the world to solve this crime, and somehow she can't solve it. It doesn't make any sense. The camera work and lighting in the film is fun, and it's good, and it looks good. I could understand everything that was happening when it came down to the action, but like I said, they overdo it. You have two great action sequences where they use these techniques that are put into the film, but by the time you get to the final fight of the movie, it just didn't work anymore for me, because you were doing it so much to the point that you never showed me something new. And to a point, it also seemed like they were shooting this really shaky, and they just stabilized the shots while editing. So you used it so much that I could actually tell that some of this was not technique, it was just good editing. Which leads me to my other problem with this movie. The editing was all over the place. The tone of this movie was all over the place. There were so many jokes that were supposed to land to make this movie likable, but it just didn't. And it also leads me to say that this movie, the name, the tagline, everything about it seems so lazy. Everything seems so half-assed except the action. And that's the biggest problem. If you think that you can sell a movie just on the action, you're mistaken. That's not why John Wick, Mad Max, and all these other movies worked. Sure, the action is the biggest thing they have to offer, but they still have some other things under their belts to offer as well if you get bored of the action at some point. Because let's face it, sure, action is fun, but there's a moment we will all get bored of gunshots and punches and explosions. At some point, we all get bored of it. And see, that's the biggest problem with films like Transformers, you know, films like The Fast and the Furious, and other movies that just work on the action. And that's the problem. If you're just gonna work on the action, you're not gonna get anywhere, okay? It's always gonna be story. And if it comes down to it, story will always be the biggest thing in a movie. If the story works, then the action will work even better. And that's why I did not like Upgraded. I don't think it's a good movie. I applaud the director, and you know, he's a writer as well, for really trying to make this kick-ass movie. But if I had read the script before this was even shot, I would have said, you are bringing nothing new to the table. I've seen this a million times done better. Even the ending of this movie was just like the ending of another movie, and that movie did it a billion times better. So at the end of the day, I think that what action movies today need to understand is, it's not just the action that makes the movie, it's also the story. The story can be dull and simple, sure, but then your characters need to be likable and believable, and you know, we have to follow them. Because you know, you can have over-the-top complicated stories, you know, and on top of that amazing action and likable characters, and you get something like this.
Your line's not long enough! No shit!
If you don't have all the equipment to make a great action movie, just having good action won't save you. And that's a fact. Because at the end of the day, story will always come first.